Hello, everyone. Dr. Judy here, Dr. Judy WTF, What the Freud. And tonight we have a very special guest, somebody that I met back in December that I want to introduce my audience to, Amy Redford. Welcome. And Amy is in Salt Lake City, Utah, and we met. We have something deeply in common in that we're both. Is that an echo? Are we echoing here?
Somebody that I met back in December that I want to introduce my
I don't
audience
know why.
to.
There's some lag or echo. Can you fix that, Tony? I don't know. Okay. Give us a second because I want people to only hear us once. We don't have to echo twice. How's that, Tony? Good? I think. Do you have your YouTube on, Amy? Do you have. Are we good? Okay, hey, let's test it out. So, hi. Can you hear me okay? And now I cannot hear you.
There you
So,
go.
oh yeah, hey, okay. Connection here. Okay, so hopefully the audio is good, the video is good. Amy Redford is with us tonight. She's a director, producer, and I met her in December. I was invited to fly out to Utah to do a piece of a docu-series titled, fill me in here, please.
Me, am I feeling? Yes. So it's the narcissist trap. And I guess it starts going live on the 13th. Sign-ups on the 27th.
Cool.
And it's from Jeff Hayes Films.
Yes. So Amy is now an expert in narcissism, I think, by now, after talking to so many people. You interviewed, what, 26?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
right?
it was over 20 people. I mean, I kind of came into it with a PhD in narcissism just from my own life
Yeah,
journey.
I hear you.
But it was an incredible opportunity to just see all of the different perspectives on this conversation. It was super fascinating.
So I want to hear about what you learned. And first, I want to introduce the title. The title was Amy's idea, Authenticity and Intuition. And the rest of it was my idea, your pathway to self-protection. Because if you're not in tune with yourself, if you're not intuitive, then you're vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable to the wrong people, we know what happens, especially in the case of narcissism. People who are narcissistic in nature are takers. And if we don't know who we are, then they'll have at it. Then they will hijack us and take us, and we'll be theirs instead of our own self. So we're going to get into that. And I do want to know what you learned. You talked to 20 plus experts in narcissism. I was very honored to be one of them, and really enjoyed our conversation. You asked amazing questions, by the way.
Thank you so much. Well, it was easy with you. You know, it was really just a matter of just pulling out all of your knowledge. So, I found it really easy to talk to you.
Thanks. So I want to
I
know
mean,
after. Yeah, go ahead.
what did I learn? I mean, uh, it's so many different things. I would say one of the biggest takeaways was that not all narcissists are jerks, and not all jerks are narcissists.
Okay, and
Um,
what's the distinction that you
well,
discovered?
because you can have people that don't present necessarily to other people as like an a-hole, right? You have people that have have figured out a way to be adored. You know, these narcissists can show up in realms of, faith-based groups, or, you know, nonprofit organizations,
Yes,
or, they can show up in self-help world,
yes,
or, therapists. And
yes,
to understand the distinction between somebody that is, sort of monopolizing your energy and your time but they're not necessarily yelling at you. You know, that's more of a trait of a malignant narcissist, which is somebody that has that sort of very obvious presentation of needing to be the center of attention all the time. So being able to understand that this thing sits on a spectrum and that a lot of us have experienced the spectrum and not even understood it.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that one of the reasons why we produced the series was I was talking to Jeff Hayes, and I was like, well, Jeff, I think I know what a narcissist is, sort of, but what do you think a narcissist is? And he says, well, apparently the ex-partner of everybody I know.
That's funny. Well,
So
remember,
I was like, okay. So he's like, I think we should it's very common in our vernacular right now.
mm-hmm,
And a lot of people are throwing it around in ways that are probably not that helpful.
mm-hmm.
So why don't we just really deconstruct it and figure out what it really is and what it really isn't,
Okay,
and what it means? What are the implications of
okay,
these people in our lives, and where do they tend to show up? So
okay.
I thought I'm all in because I'm certainly have had my round.
Yeah, well, people don't get interested in narcissism unless they've been scarred in some way. And
Yeah.
I'm in. I mean, yes, as a psychologist and as a woman and as a human being, I have been very naive at times in my life, large pieces of my life. And because I don't, okay, here's one way that I see it. Most people don't think that way. I'm not sitting here thinking, how am I going to get something from you? If I want something from you, I'll just say, hey, Amy, can I have something from you? And it's pretty, like right now, I want an interview with you. Okay, nothing illegal, unethical, or usury about that. However, we're not thinking that the person that is the person next to us, maybe our significant other, best friend, boss, parent, whoever that is, we're not thinking that they're out to take us, take from us, because we don't think that way. So that's the first aspect that I want to point out to everybody is that because most people don't think that way, they do something that I've called positive projection. So person comes into your life and you positively project on them. They're nice, they're good looking, they're generous, they say sweet things, they do things, they present well, and so we automatically assume that they're good people. And okay,
Yeah.
so we give them the brownie points before they've even earned it.
And I don't know 1,000% that I want to lose that in myself. I don't want that to be taken from me because I was just listening to a really wonderful leader in the LGBTQ advocacy world here. His name is Troy Williams, and he's the ED of Equality Utah. And there were, these different people were talking about their leadership styles and how they do what they do, especially in a very fraught world where there's a lot of misunderstanding and
Mm-hmm.
lack of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, I just look at everyone like a future ally. He can be sitting across the table from people that other people would just immediately demonize, immediately decide, well, there's no way that we're ever going to find common ground. But he assumes that they're going to find common ground. And so he does. And that's
Okay.
something that I hold dear to myself. I want to believe I do find that in general there is more to believe in. We have more in common. If I'm a little lost in a space and I don't know what we have in common, if I'm in public or whatever, I'll be like, everybody raise your hand that likes parking tickets.
Yeah, there we go.
Everybody raise your
Okay,
hand that
there we
worries about your
go.
kids, your aging parents. We have so much in common. And so when somebody violates your optimism, when somebody takes what they see as an opportunity to take advantage of what they might see as your naivete,
Mm-hmm.
um, it is something that you ultimately have to come back around and say, okay, that is a reflection on them. That's not about me being a fool. That's about somebody who doesn't understand that it's an inefficient path that they've just taken. by
So back to what you were saying, I also don't want to walk around being closed and not intimate with people and not giving them my best. I don't want to do that.
yeah,
That's a lousy life, okay?
so, I got some really good advice. I was going through some struggles with somebody that I had been very close to, and they were going through their own, sort of struggles emotionally, and I was just not really feeling safe around them.
Mhm.
And I had a therapist say to me, just keep them as close as you can keep your heart open.
Oh, that is so
And
beautiful.
I was like, that is genius.
Wow.
Because sometimes that's going to be right here. Sometimes that's going to be in an intimate space. Sometimes that's going to be far away, but it lets you kind of have agency over where your boundaries are. And you
Mhm.
get to decide, ooh, I'm not quite safe. My heart starts to close down. I think I need to create a little bit more distance so that I can keep my heart open.
Because that's what we're wired to do. We're wired to connect. We want to be human. We want to be humane. And if you know a little bit about my mind map, panel 7 is my metaphor for interconnection. Okay, so you see the light in the center, that's about you plus another human being together create a third entity, which is 1 plus 1 is greater than just who you are or just who I am. And together we're having a conversation and hopefully bringing some light into the world. And
Mm-hmm.
we want that. That to me is the most powerful model of life that I can think of. That's why it's called the paradigm shift on my mind map. But I really love that way of seeing it. As close as you can take that person and keep your heart open. And then intuition, right? Intuition.
Oh
This is
gosh, I
so
mean,
big. That's why, okay, I grabbed your words authenticity and intuition because at a certain point, right, people enter our space and they're no longer safe there because there's something that we intuit is not okay.
it's an interesting thing because it takes a lot of work. I mean, that authenticity part takes, I mean, it's just in my own experience, being able to listen to your intuition takes a fair amount of being able to say, I don't know, a fair amount of being able to say, I think I need to tap out here for a second and adjust and reestablish. And or you say, this is a situation in which I'm likely to do X
Mm-hmm.
because of my history. So
Mm-hmm.
I should probably second guess whether or not my intuition is going to be at play or my protective warrior that steps in front of my intuition, right? So most of the mistakes that I've made in life, it's always good news, bad news, because well, I was right, good news,
Yeah.
bad news, I didn't listen.
To your intuition.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, and I look back and I go, oh my God, the whoopsie went off in my belly. The red flags were flapping in my face.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, no, that's inconvenient,
Yeah.
Um,
So,
so,
okay.
then going back and saying, oh, having a little bit of remorse for having not listened.
So
Um,
what do you think? Um, what do you think incentivized you to override your intuition? What were you hoping for, or looking for, or what? Maybe what optimistic part of you was still wanting to stay vulnerable and give the opportunity to a person.
I don't know that it was the optimistic part of me. I think it was probably the lazy part of me
Oh, okay.
because I wanted to like just sort of skip some steps. And I think it's like when you listen to your intuition and you go, okay, this means that I can't just go for the shiny thing, right? That leap to the shiny thing feels like, well, if it works, what if it works? What if it works and I don't have to do all that hard work?
Yeah,
You know, what if it
yeah.
works and I can just sort of skip over it? I can ride this little, this little sort of good fortune bubble. And yet the inefficiency of that is vast. And I just find that it's that whoopsie in the belly, no matter what it is, just to
Mm-hmm.
stop
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, what is this? Is this my intuition? Or sometimes it's irrational fear. It's you're making a fear-based judgment on something based on something that has nothing to do with the situation, right? Somebody comes in and suddenly you react and you're like, wait, am I reacting to this moment right now? Or am I reacting to something that happened 10 years ago? Um,
Or from childhood, which is why
yeah,
I like to go back to the cause or the source, because if your blueprint is set up such that you are groomed to please, for example, okay, and you're groomed to put the other person before yourself. And that's how I personally define narcissism. I look at it as a system gone wrong where the parents lack empathy. They're literally missing some kind of an empathy chip, and they put their own feelings before the feelings of the child. So the system gets flipped, and because children are so motivated to please their parents and get the goodies from the parents, they will bend and shape and mold themselves to be that person. And so we then take that and then we pay it forward into our lives, and then we set ourselves up for that whole what the Freud, which is why I talk about
yeah,
the what the Freud, because we keep repeating it and repeating it. We're really repeating it not because we're stupid, but we just want the happy ending. We want to have closure. We want to have the satisfaction that the person who's hurting us or hurt us finally light bulb gets it, and they could step into their heart and say, "Wow, I can't believe I did that to you. That was that was so unconscious of me." And we wish and pray that humanity was like that. If everybody was able to step into their heart and have empathy and own their own stuff, which is a big mature thing to do, then then we can connect. It's just that when you've got an empathy chip missing, it's like, you know, I step on your toes, it doesn't hurt me, so it doesn't matter. I'll do it again and again. I'm not bothered by it.
yes, exactly. It's a fascinating disconnect, right? I mean, it's a fascinating thing that we create these obstructions for ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and it uh, it's an amazing process to sort of untangle that
Yes.
from the coping mechanism. It's a those things can come in handy. I mean, for sure. It's there is when I look at some of the people, like the parents that you were talking about, and how they put themselves at the center, or they don't affirm the value of somebody's emotions, their
Mm-hmm.
kids' emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go back, in terms of the idea of the pursuit of what the Freud, and you're saying, okay, well, what happened to them?
The
Where
same.
did they make a decision that their emotions, their vulnerabilities left them in danger, left them unsafe?
So
And you know, most parents, I think, on some level, think they're doing right by their children, even if it means, I'm going to beat the crap out of you because then you'll toughen up because the world's going to beat the crap out of you too. You know, there's some logic system in there that says I think I'm doing right by my children, and it's up to to us to recalibrate those belief systems. I mean, I know it's hard to think that way, but that's the way I kind of try to figure out human beings.
this whole multi-generational thing where unhealed parents are now having children, and then they project all their pain onto their children. And if you think about what is narcissism, it's a defense mechanism. Okay, it's a defense mechanism against pain. And if we don't get what Dr. John Bowlby, attachment theorist, talks about for what is needed to have a healthy human psyche, and it's pretty basic. Okay, eye contact, skin contact, in an ideal world, breastfeeding, parents that make you feel safe, an environment that you feel protected in, attunement, mirroring. Okay, if we don't get all that stuff, then we don't get the connectivity, the emotional connectivity that we need to flourish. And if it's really disconnected, then we start shutting down, walling up, and we start playing a different game of life. So instead of playing the game of life of intimacy and interconnectivity, really, really hurt people who have shut down their hearts start thinking, well, what are human beings good for? They're certainly not
Right.
good for attunement and mirroring and making me feel important and special and lovable. So, okay, so they're commodities. Awesome. So now the objectification. What am I going to do with him? What am I going to do with her? Well,
Yeah.
okay, so I'll have sex with her. I'll have sex. I'll use her for some money. I'll use her to fill my hole in the soul for some entertainment purposes. Okay, so that's where the heart starts closing down and they get all walled in. And then what are they? They don't, you can even look in their eyes. And I was out with a friend last night and he jokingly said, so what do you think? Do you think I'm narcissistic? And I kind of did a little quick, it just was an intuitive thing. I looked in his eyes. I said, no, I don't think so, because you're looking at me, and I see emotion there, and I see a connection there. Oftentimes with narcissists, you'll look in their eyes, and it'll be snake eyes. Have you ever looked into somebody's eyes? They're just dark. They're
Yeah.
like dead.
I mean,
The
I've
sociopathy is a great example. You look at a sociopath's eyes, and ooh, intense.
yeah, I sort of wish that they all had the snake eyes, right? Because that would make it a little bit easier to flag.
Yeah.
I certainly had the experience of somebody that really liked the way that empathy looked on them. They could see that it was a good look.
Mm-hmm.
And so they learned how to listen in a way that was flattering. And they
Okay.
learned the tools of how to get somebody like me who likes talking to people about their feelings and, is sort of a study of the human condition. And they learn how to seduce you into thinking that they know your love language or whatever. And that to me is the more dangerous. It's sort
It
of
is.
you know, um, a Faustian deal, or like I I think that the study of the art of empathy
Mm-hmm.
is pretty intense. That's where it's fascinating to me that a lot of these, it's like a Luciferian kind of quality. Um, and I think we have a lot of that going on. And
Well,
I think
yeah, people.
we celebrate it. And my deepest desire with this series that we're doing is not to necessarily feed into anybody's condition of being a victim. I don't think that that's necessarily a sustainable state of being.
Mm-hmm.
But acknowledgement of you were injured. This was not okay. And you
Mm-hmm.
might be embarrassed about it, but you're not
Mm-hmm.
alone.
Mm-hmm.
And let's figure out the stepping stones for this not to happen again. And, back to that sort of like intuition, and authenticity. Authenticity also, the delivery device of authenticity also has to, I think, be coupled with kindness. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you have people saying, "Oh no, I'm just being honest," you look like shit, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You might, but was that necessary? Was it kind? Was it true? And I think it's so the authenticity is, well, why would you need to say that to someone? What was it that you just got out of saying to somebody something that was unkind? And then you have to go to that next level saying, well, what is the authentic thing that sat underneath that? What did I get out of that? And it's like
So,
digging and the digging and the
okay,
digging.
so I'm going back to a point you made, and then I want to address the point that you're making. So, therapists actually teach cognitive empathy. I'm not a big fan of that unless it's coupled with going deep into the childhood wounds and really opening up the pain points in the person that shut their heart down, because the person, let's say the narcissistically wounded person, cannot have empathy for another person until they are empathized with. Okay, so you can't pay it forward until you go back into the pain, and most people don't like that idea. Who wants to open up a whole thing about how dad didn't even want him or her to be born, or mom leaving the family, or I hear horrendous things, and I'm sure you have as well. So who wants to open that up? However, unless you open that up and help that person to have empathy for that infant part of them that had to shut down to defend against the pain, you all you have all you have left in your hands is cognitive empathy. So, what's that? You teach them to be nice. Okay, so I want you to ask the waiter, "How are you?" Ah, empathy. I want you to tell your husband that you want to know how their day went. Oh, empathy. It's just that, you brought in the right word into the discussion, authenticity. So I make a big deal about consciousness is causal. So if you're coming from the consciousness of manipulating the system and just feeding the right words so that you can, quote, chameleon yourself into an empathic human being, it's not authentic. And there's going to be something in your gut that tells you that.
Yeah.
Okay, there's going to be a mismatch. You've seen people smile and they don't really mean it, or people who cry and they're just acting. Okay, you're a
Yeah.
director producer, so okay, and
They're
something.
not very good acting.
Okay, so you're good at directing and producing, and you're good at recognizing authenticity. So if somebody doesn't pull it off, you can go and back into the scene and say, just it didn't feel right. Okay,
Well, it's that performative part, right?
right.
Like if it's performative, then let it go.
Let
Don't
it
push
go.
yourself. So even if we're talking about acting, if you're in this scene and the screen direction said she cries, and I'm like, why does she cry?
Yeah.
You know? If we have to say she cries, then we haven't done our work to understand what is the emotional, circumstance in which she might cry, but she also might laugh or she might do nothing.
Right.
As long as we understand that everybody feels differently, everybody grieves differently, this might manifest differently. As long as she's telling the truth about the circumstance, it might come out in numerous ways. So the performative part of empathy, it can be dangerous because it obscures, you know, a lack of empathy. But I understand what you're saying though about teaching it, because even like you're talking about kids, one of the reasons why I wanted to teach my kids please and thank you and to be polite is because I loved what the world was feeding back to them. They
I,
say as
I
little
think
kids,
that's
please and
not what
thank
I
you.
mean by teaching fake empathy. You're role modeling to your children, and it's
And then
true.
people turn to them and they say, "Oh, well, aren't you nice?"
Yes.
And then they're
Yes.
like, "Oh, I guess I am nice." And it kind of feels good. So for somebody that hasn't learned or hadn't modeled empathy, maybe forcing that and saying, "Now how do you feel?" And they go, "Actually, that feels kind of good. Maybe I could continue to ask questions that I actually mean.
Okay.
Maybe I could, and that kind of feels a little bit better than not.
Okay.
So maybe it is something that you can teach."
Okay. So is it better for the narcissistic spouse to treat other people with kindness? Yes. However, if it's the only way that they're improving themselves, again, it'll only carry so far, because that other person will intuit that they're just faking it till they make it. They have an agenda. They want something from you. They're trying to preserve a marriage that they already pretty much screwed up, and now they're on good behavior. So they're going to learn how to parrot the right words. So, it's back to consciousness is causal. So if they're coming from the consciousness of behaving well, without really owning their own stuff and trying to unpack all of that, which just turn their heart cold, right? Then we just have a parrot, a good
Hmm.
trained parrot.
Yeah. Yeah, a trained parrot that knows how to get the next cracker, you know?
That's right. Exactly. Um, you said something earlier. I'm sure it'll come around again. Um, so my favorite line in my book, "Be the Cause: Healing Human Disconnect," which everyone can have, by the way. It's a free PDF. All you have to do is ask for it and download it, and it'll go through the whole mind map of the cause of childhood wounds and their reactions and how they blueprint, and then how we go down the tube of chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And this is what we, it's almost like we're living in panels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, wound reaction and coding, chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And we never really get to shift out of the mess. Why? Because there's no pathway to it, and we keep reinfecting ourselves because we keep going back to the herder. That's
Yeah,
who we really want to have repair us. The person that hurt us is the one we want to have repair us. The nice guy we don't need repair with. So, most people are you've heard the line, "Oh, I like him, but I'm not that attracted to him. He's such a nice guy.
right.
It's not interesting." Like, ugh, she's a really nice girl, but it's not very interesting. What's interesting is the person who has the edge and who's a little bit unavailable, that we have to chase. So we have to work hard for to get to their heart if they have any. That's the interesting one. And so once we can,
Until it's not.
huh?
Until it's not interesting.
Until it's not. Until, I remember years ago I used to hate sushi. I don't know. I thought it was kind of creepy, and I don't know why. I was sitting in a sushi bar and I was watching this guy take the little salmon eggs and then the quail egg on top of it, and he was popping it in his mouth, and I'm thinking, ugh. Okay, and before I could say anything, he just took one of those little suckers and popped it in my mouth, and it's just like I was sushi violated, but you
I
know
was
what?
gonna say,
Right?
you
But I
sound
was
terribly
young. I was
consensual.
experimental. So, okay, so then I started chewing on this and I went, wow, this is amazing. This is amazing. So once we're done with the trauma and the drama, and once we're so tired and we've been through the what the Freud umpteen times and we just don't feel like it, our tastes change. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Okay? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was the last person we interviewed. One of the things she said was, "I just became uninteresting to narcissists. Like I'm not bait because they don't. I'm not interesting to them because I'm not feeding what they're serving.
That's such
You
a
know,
sign of health. It's
yeah.
such a
It
sign of health.
is. It's not. And it's a work in progress. Like I was sure that the one before my last had cured me, but you know it's a journey. I mean, it's part of, like, the interaction can also be very um much like uh a a way to avoid the things that you really need to do. They're so all consuming. It's your reality television version of your life, because you're now on a hamster wheel of having to navigate all of their stuff, which is a great distraction from your own stuff. One of my favorite things about the whole idea of narcissism that I learned, which I think is fascinating, was that a lot of people have omitted the other part of the mythology around narcissists, and it's that it wasn't a solo story. It wasn't a one-hander. It was a two-hander. It was narcissist and echo. And
Yes. Yes.
that and the echo part of it, I think, is also fascinating and something that we all have to own, which is, what part of the story did we play? What part of the story do I own? Right. And in the story, Echo, I guess, I can't even remember what it was. I think Echo fell in love with Narcissus. Narcissus' mom got pissed off and condemned her to only repeat the sentences of the last person she was talking to, right? So she never had a voice of her own. And this is the way that these relationships intersect and interact, and you're playing a part. So,
Right. So this is the ownership, right? What part am I playing in the system that perpetuates this vampire effect and the bleeding out of the other person? So if the person is, echo's the perfect word because it's the mirror, you know? I'm the echo. I'm going to mirror everything that my partner needs to hear. And as a result of it, I'm not going to develop an authentic self because I don't even know what that is. I'm just the mirror of the person. And the hope is that he'll love me more because the more I mirror him, the more happy he will be, for example. Okay. And then I'll get the goodies. I'll be unconditionally loved. End of story. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
And it doesn't work that way because, again, there's that hole in the soul. So what's a hole in the soul is it's insatiable. So if somebody didn't get those emotional goodies, they're starving. And so,
And the starving part of it, that's the neuroses, right? Because, you know, if you start dining on scraps, then you start fiending, right? You start fiending because you're never satiated.
never.
Um, and it leaves you in a real state of neuroses.
But like what you said, the other person was groomed to do that because they were groomed to keep satiating the unsatiable. So that's where the vampiring effect. You see, if you,
Totally.
I'm kind of talking very metaphorically and like a cartoon caricature. Okay, so you've got one echo feeding, 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 and the other one mirrored, 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 mirrored. And you look at their picture, and echo is drained and weak and thin and tired and ready to keel over. And then the narcissist is huffing and puffing and rosy and and until even that isn't enough for them, and nobody really wins in the system.
No, nobody wins in the system, but I mean, the good news, I think, is that on the other side of it is great knowledge. On the
Is
other side of it, because I think a lot of us suffer, people with narcissistic personality disorder, in a way we haven't even recognized. And then once you really earn your stripes, you are much more able, I think, to see it coming. I know I am in certain
Yep.
situations.
Yes.
And even if a situation looks like, oh, well, if it's a work situation, I'm like, this sounds kind of good, and then I sort of have that whoops in my belly and I go, this is familiar.
So I love the
Yeah.
concept of earnership, and oftentimes I'll tell the people who come to see me, why don't you kind of, you don't have to be that negative, like what you were saying, you don't want to cut your heart out and not be vulnerable. So kind of park yourself in pleasant neutral, okay? And then live life and have your relationship with the person, and see what they do and see how you feel. And then if they feed you and nurture you and reflect back and it's a mutual thing, then they can get closer. Okay? And then they can get closer. And you don't have to gamble with your heart. I think a lot of people, I know I have gambled with my heart. Oh my goodness, I'm all in. I'm committed. I'm just, I'm a stand for this person. And it's like this bad joke. I'll tell it. It's so bad. Okay, so what's the difference between um, bacon and egg?
I don't know. What is the difference between bacon and egg?
Okay, so the bacon is committed and the chicken is involved. Okay, and that's how I see it. So the person that's all in is the pig that died for the relationship, and he sacrificed himself. And then the egg is like, okay, all right, well, I could make the chicken, I could make other eggs, I'm just kind of involved. So it's not even handed. It's not like this thing where you're both in it and you both have something to greatly gain, by having each other's back and greatly something to lose. It's just such a bad game of life. It's so uneven handed. And, I've used the word soul rape. I know that's radical, but, when you're that open hearted and you're vulnerable emotionally and sexually and spiritually and on all levels, and you think this person is your soulmate and you're going to merge with this person, and then they merge with you, and then they pull up their pants and leave. Wow.
Which, usually is a merciful thing because it's not sustainable. I mean, if like there's people that I thought were gifts sent by God, and I realized, oh, they were, but not why I thought they were.
Yeah,
They
right.
were lessons,
Right.
and they were hard learned lessons. But I think, and then you can see like even for me in my life right now, my friendships have gotten so rich, and being able to sort of step away from it all and really nurture friendships
Mm-hmm.
and have the time and space to really listen to my children,
Mm-hmm.
even some quiet times for myself,
Yes.
um, and 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 really tune into like, when's the last time I laughed? When is, am I drawn towards my joy? You know, these are important things to measure. I struggle because I'm a passionate person, and I do believe that there are soul connections, and I do believe that you can collide with somebody and it is a soul match, and it is remarkable. And so that idea of the love bombing that
Yeah.
narcissists will often do,
Yes.
I was like, well, does that mean that sort of love at first sight, or that cataclysmic sort of connection is all fake? Is it always fake?
I don't think
And the answer is no,
always.
it's not always
No,
fake.
not always.
But if it doesn't stand the test of time,
Mm-hmm.
then it's not going to last. It's not sustainable. If it doesn't stand this test of going, oh my gosh, you're such a great person. I think you're amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm just going to go check in with myself for a second, because I really want to make sure that I'm bringing my best self to the party. So I think I need to step away because I feel a little intoxicated. And if that person won't allow for that time and space, that's a really good sign.
Yeah,
Really good
and
sign
it'll
that it's
shake
time to
out.
walk away.
It shakes out pretty quickly, but we have such a desire for that soulmate, that very intimate place with another human being, that it's almost like we don't want to pop the bubble on ourselves. Like, nah, they were just a little negligent. They forgot, or don't worry about it. It's okay. That's not them at their best. And
Yeah.
after a certain point, there's a critical mass, and the scale really starts to tip, where you're putting in, and you see it just sort of, it's not even handed at all.
I think where people also will misdiagnose this dynamic is at work, because especially with certain kinds of entrepreneurs, or visionaries, and you go, oh my gosh, they must be a visionary. They're going to be the next best thing, right?
Yeah.
Because they
Yes.
they they capture the attention of all, and they
Mm-hmm.
seem so sure of who they are, and you follow them, and then you feel like, you know oh, well, surely this is going to pay off, and then you have this feeling of embarrassment that you put up with what you did, that somehow you hope that at the end of the day it's all going to turn around. And there has to be that point where, you know what, okay, I'm going to make a decision that even if it is the next best thing, even if this guy, or this woman, is a total genius, it is not worth it to me. It is costing me too much, and I'm going to get off this train.
Well,
Leadership doesn't necessarily mean that kind of. I mean, the best leaders are the ones that yield this stage and are inquisitive.
have you
And if
heard the
that's not
term?
happening in that situation, in work situation, take stock. It's not going to get better.
Were you referring to communal narcissists, leaders, bosses, people who are they're almost a little bit cult-like and idealized, and I've certainly met people who've had parents like that, and it's very, very confusing. It's a real mind F to them because
Sure.
other people will come up and say, you know, your mother, your father, oh my God, they're the nicest. They donated $1 million to our cause. They're starting an orphanage in Africa, and they've decided to adopt three little babies. And you're thinking, oh my God, these are the kindest and nicest people. And then you find out from their children who come to therapy, my dad used to beat me, and he's an alcoholic, and he's a womanizer, and my mom has been beaten down, and she's got to look good for all the members of the community because they've got to keep the front. So, you know, there are just lots of ways humans trick each other. It makes me personally very, very sad. And, yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I've taken upon myself to teach people a better game of life so that they're not unconscious. They could see it coming, and then they can do the prevention thing. You don't want to be at the effect of the problem. You don't want to be in the solution. You want to ideally be in the prevention of it. That's the best place to be.
And it might take a little moment of saying, I need to parent myself for a second here, you know. I mean, I even say this to my kids, so, you know, one of them that sometimes struggles with some impulse control stuff. And I'm like, look, I'm not saying you have to be different than who you are. I'm just saying you are not going to lose with a 15-second pause and go, is this in service of me? Is this in service of the other person that I'm standing across? You know, and if after that moment, and you know, and I have my kids text themselves instead of the friends that they're angry at, because you can read it and say, how would I receive this? Right.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, part of this whole process is giving yourself the dignity of that space,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
would just say, I get to make, I get to take a moment here and reassess. It's actually quite a confident move, you know.
That's it sounds like that's been very, very important to you to take a beat, step back, check in with yourself, right? And
Yeah.
and the biggest thing parents can do, I had a somebody that I was working with yesterday, and after learning the mind map, she looks at me and goes, "Oh my God, I've damaged my children, and I didn't
Oh
do
yeah.
this, and I didn't do that, and you know, I'm a terrible mother." And I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. You know, the easiest, most reparative thing that you can do is just own your own stuff." And I have this thing called the peaceful healing dialogue, which very simply is something like, "Hey, little Janie, can I talk to you about the other day when mommy lost her cookies and I slammed the pan on the stove and the grease went flying all over? Yeah, mommy, that really was, that was horrible. Like you're like a crazy woman. You know, I just wanted to say that I was just really off my rocker. I just got really triggered, and that wasn't good, and I'm so sad that it scared you guys. Okay, and I just want you to know that I'm aware of that behavior, and when I get close to that level of frustration, I've now learned that I've got to step back. So kids need to hear it. We're not
Yeah.
perfect. No, no parent is perfect, and we're not meant to be. Alfred Winnicott, Good Enough Mother. We can't be perfect mother because the world isn't perfect. And if we have a perfect mother, boy, are we going to be upset when the world isn't perfect. Mom's perfect, and now I feel really let down. So what do? We own our own stuff. We show them our process.
Yeah.
We let them know that we're human. We get it when their amygdalas light up like a red bulb and go off because that's how we are as a human
Yeah.
race.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's I was just talking to somebody that I work with, and I was like, look, uh as soon as I'm perfect, I'll hold you to that standard.
Huh.
Until then,
And then she
until
ran
then.
away from you, right?
But I was like, look, because until I'm perfect, why don't we acknowledge when we make mistakes, and then we can work through them.
See, I love a friendship like that. I love a friend where I could be brutally honest and say I really screwed up. That was not cool.
Yeah,
Let me figure out where that was coming from, and what can I do to what can I do to make this okay with you? What could I do to earnership? If you take
yeah,
something from someone, what can I do to repair?
yeah,
Because that's the way it's going to go for the rest of our lives. We're gonna be connected, and then we're gonna disconnect, and then we have to figure out
yeah.
the way back. In the
Gosh, that
case,
ownership goes so far, though. It's incredible,
it
you know?
does. I have a whole episode. It was shocking what I heard in that. I wasn't prepared for it. It was called "Parents Own Your Own Stuff," and if you have a chance, listen to it because
For sure.
I didn't know that conversation was coming. It was,
Oh,
like I'm telling you, it was an intense conversation. So it was a call in, so of course we went into it. So parents own your own stuff, and knowledge is king, knowledge is queen. The more we know, the less we're unconscious, and the wiser we are. And when we find somebody that we can let our guard down with enough, because it's not going to be perfect, and we find another person who's responsible to our heart, that's who we want to play life with. Those are the ones,
for sure.
right? So just tell me again the name of the
Yeah, so, I should be much better at this. It's called The Narcissist Trap.
thank you.
And it's with Jeff Hayes Films. And I think I'm trying to figure out, it's a really interesting model because it is very much a toolbox, and it's sort of like around the last series I did with him was actually around cancer. And it was sort of, okay, well, you got diagnosed, or somebody that you love got diagnosed. Now what? What is the decision tree that is involved in that moment? And let's try to provide you with all of the information that might come your way. And
Mm-hmm.
you as an autonomous individual get to decide, okay, am I going to go Western? Am I going to go Eastern? Am I going to go hybrid? Am I,
Yeah, yeah.
um, and so the, and this is very much a similar idea, which is we're just going to deconstruct this concept. And all of these different experts have different intersections. I mean, we've talked to two people that were in cults. We talked to people that are family therapists. We talked to economists. We talked
Mm-hmm.
about the actual cost of the narcissists that are in our society and why
Yes.
it actually matters from a financial point of view.
100%.
Um, it's really, and so because, no two brains are the same, the series provides a lot of different entry points, and they work with you have a sort of a direct interaction with the hypnotherapist that can take you through a kind of meditation
Mm-hmm.
for you to touch down with yourself
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
understand what it is, how to position yourself so that you can better recognize what when one of them comes at you, or if you're in it, or how to not let it happen again. So it's a pretty practical approach, and I think it's kind of a cool thing even to watch with your loved ones, because they might take away different things than you, and they might, it's being able to have a conversation that you don't have to stimulate because
Mm-hmm.
it's just sitting
Mm-hmm.
in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
um, so it's been a really gratifying project.
I can't wait to watch it. Of course, I'm part of it,
Oh,
so
I lost you there.
oh,
Are you on mute?
um, no, can you hear me now?
Didn't get that. Could you try
Oh,
again?
Can
you
you,
know my
can you hear
the,
me?
the computer gremlins are listening to our conversation.
Okay,
Siri just
can you
decided
hear
to
me
butt in.
now? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so I love that. First of all, I'm really excited about viewing it because I want to know other perspectives on narcissism, and of course, you interviewed me, and I just want to see it in the context of all the other discoveries. Um, I'm really glad you had an economist there. I think about that often. Years ago, I had a stop smoking program, and I would approach corporations and say, are your profits going up in smoke? Put out that flame with an employer benefit that benefits the employee and the employer. So
Right.
the point that I'm making is that narcissism is very expensive. It affects the body, it affects the mind. Money spent on healers and chiropractors and nutritionists and therapists, and of course the money lost because you've been taken for a ride financially, and this bleeds into
Yeah.
sociopathy. I mean, this is very, very costly, not to mention the emotional cost of the depression and the anxiety and the break of trust and the re-traumatization, because that's really what we're getting ourselves into, is we're re-traumatizing old childhood wounds. And how many times can Humpty Dumpty fall off the wall?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. So that's why, after a while, it's like, I don't need this game. I'm
Yeah.
done. And I'm looking for
Yeah.
people that I could really trust and trust my heart to, and have a little fun, because we're responsible for owning our own stuff and taking care of each other, and then having intimacy.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's, the cost also if it's in a professional environment, because a lot of the people that you think are going to lead you to high places, it's not in their minds, it's not in their best interest to actually complete the task. So they won't finish the job, and they won't grab the
Yeah,
brass ring, and they
right.
won't do all those things. And then you've wasted a lot of time, hitching your wagon to them. So
So I
um
know that we're almost out of time. I really, really enjoyed talking to you. I did then. I am now.
thank you,
Um,
Dr. Judy. It's been quite a wonderful conversation.
yeah, I agree. And if you're in LA, please let me know.
I sure will. I sure will.
And I'll put the announcement up before this, the narcissistic trap. I'll let my audience know when it's playing, and then you'll send me links as to how to access this, and
Absolutely.
um, I can email that out to everybody.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so very
Thank you
much.
so much, Dr. Judy. You have a good night.
Okay, good night, Amy.
Bye.
Bye.